For USCFootball.com, I'm Jack Smith, alongside Shotgun Spratling for instant analysis from USC's 42-28 win in Tempe over Arizona State. And Shotgun, everyone expected a blowout. Maybe we were a little bit naive because this ended up being basically a stereotypical Pac-12 after dark game, a closer one than Trojan fans would have wanted, but at least it's a victory for USC.
Yeah, it had some feelings of Oregon State last year. You know, the first true road game for USC. We're not counting Stanford, that doesn't count. But the first time you go and there's crowd noise and stuff, there was some false starts. There was trouble getting the plays in, calling timeouts, all those type of things we saw in that Oregon State game. And I think the difference is that this team's just not as good as Oregon State to be able to keep it close, and USC had a rally at the very end. So I think it was very similar to that. And we saw USC grow from that game, and that's what they're going to have to do, because this performance won't get it done against better opponents. USC should have blown this team out by many more points. The defense had some really nice things, and then other times you're like, why is everyone trying to tackle with their shoulder and not try to wrap anybody up? They did have 8 sacks. They caused a couple of turnovers. So there were some positives there, but giving up 28 points to a team that hadn't scored in 6 quarters, even if they do get a quarterback back, it's Drew Pine. He shouldn't be throwing for 220 yards against you anyways. It was an unsatisfying win. It was a win. It's a road win, and that's a good thing for USC, but it was unsatisfying in a lot of areas in that regard. The offense was a little bit, up and down. They shot themselves in the foot some. There's some decisions that were kind of, you scratch your head a little bit about, not taking a field goal to go up by 2 scores, going for it on 4th down, not getting it. Now that's also just the confidence they have in this offense. So, we saw a lot of different things in this game, some positive, a bunch that they want to go clean up. Lincoln Riley said this definitely was not their cleanest game, and definitely they were going to have to go clean up a bunch of stuff, and that's going to be on both sides of the ball. They got to be able to get the play in and be able to get the checks made at the line of scrimmage with Caleb having more than 2 seconds left on the play clock. Those things have to be cleaned up. Give credit to the Arizona State crowd. It was fantastic tonight. They were really into it. The student section was great. There was a sellout, so give credit there. But USC should have been prepared better for this. They talk about how, they play with crowd noise all the time at practice, so they should be able to do all their checks and stuff, and it just was not a smooth operation tonight. I think that's probably the biggest thing, is that this wasn't the same smooth team that we've seen, especially on the offensive side, the first 3 games. So a lot of stuff to clean up, but you get the win, you get out of here, you go home, you get ready for an early trip to Colorado next week.
I think a couple things ran true when watching the game for me. Lincoln Riley has mentioned it. When you're USC and you're going to a road place, you're their headline game for the season. Everyone's going to show up because they want to beat USC. They want to beat the number 5 team in the country. And I think it also rings true that one of the most dangerous teams in the country is always the team with nothing to lose. And Arizona State, maybe we overlooked that because we were saying, well, this is a team that's at rock bottom. But when you're at rock bottom, you've got a bowl ban for the end of the season, so you really just have nothing to lose. This is your bowl game. This is, the Pac-12 championship at the Arizona State level, because this is one of the biggest chances they had to knock off a ranked opponent. And it felt like when USC got into the stadium, this crowd started to file in, that it really did feel like not only did the Arizona State fans want to see an upset victory over USC, they came to boo Caleb Williams, everything like that. Arizona State pulled out all the stops. They were going to do everything in their power to win. You saw that with Kenny Dillingham's play calling. You saw that with the effort from some of the players on offense and defense. It really felt like Arizona State was a team that realized, hey, we've got nothing to lose. We had a terrible week last week, but why don't we come out and try and shock the world?
Yeah, of course, and they're going to do that, but still USC should have rolled through them, because they're down to, the third-string guys on their offensive line, and Drew Pine's not their starting quarterback. It's not Jaden Rashada, who's a guy that's more talented. They have a couple of nice pieces. Cam Scatabo did a bunch of nice things, whether it was punting, whether it was throwing a fake punt pass for a big completion, catching the ball in the backfield, running the ball. He did a little bit of everything, and he was fantastic for him. Elijah Badger's another nice weapon on the outside for him, and they got Jalen Connors back there, their tight end. So I gave them a couple of weapons on inside, outside, and whatnot, but they still don't have anywhere the talent to be comparative to USC. So that's what's disappointing about USC's performance in that regard. And yeah, they did. They pulled out all the stops. Kenny Dillingham takes over the play calling, and it was definitely much different. But also, they were just running similar stuff to what USC runs, as far as the guard tackle pulls, and Cam Scatabo was getting chunk yardage against the defense there. They ran it twice on 3rd and long and caught USC getting out of their rush lanes. So things like that where, if you're playing against a really good team, you can't give up that extra possession on a third down. They have basically three extra possessions. If someone runs the ball on 3rd and 10 or longer, you should make that stop. They should be forced to either kick a field goal or punt the ball. So I'm counting that as 3 possessions, because twice they did that, once scoring a touchdown, once picking up another first down, and once they picked up the fake punt pass thing that apparently, Kenny Dillingham said wasn't even actually the play that was called, but, basically they were trying to rush off Kalen Bullock to get Zachariah Branch on the field, and, they saw that and were able to attack that. So those things, that's 3 extra times where you should have gotten off the field earlier as a defense. And if you do, maybe the scoreboard looks different, and maybe your thoughts on the defense are a little bit different, but they gave up more chunk yards on the ground. That's kind of disappointing. So definitely things that were different, and they pulled out all the stops, but they didn't hit on all the times when they pulled out the stops. They had a wide open touchdown that they missed. So, USC could have been in a even different situation if Arizona State was a better team and could connect on those type of plays, on some opportunities that they did have. So, like I said, USC, you take the win, but a lot of stuff that needs to be cleaned up going forward. And, starting with, on offense, getting the play in and, giving Caleb Williams an opportunity to be able to assess the defense and then go at it. On the defensive side, you got to tackle better. That was disappointing, Lincoln Riley said, because, they tackled pretty well the first 3 games, and this game they didn't. So, is it rust off the bye week? There's excuses that can be made along the way. But again, it's an unsatisfactory win for USC fans, because they expected a blowout and you expected to see the second stringers get in and get their opportunity, and that was not the case, because you let a team hang around, and when you let a team hang around Pac-12 After Dark in a bumping stadium, then this is what's going to happen. USC got pushed, but also give them credit for having the moxie to, not fold in those situations. When you start going, they shouldn't be in this game with us, what's going on? And I thought Eric Gentry had a great quote about it, paraphrasing here, but he basically said, the younger guys look up to us, and to not see any panic from the team leaders, I think was really important. So, they understand what was that, and Eric Gentry was bouncing around like a pogo stick after the game, hugging Michael Phelps, doing a little bit of everything. He was so excited being back, playing against his former team, being the visitor, and, being able to see the crowd going crazy and stuff. So he was super excited. He had a pretty good game. He missed that big tackle on the Scatabo run down the right sideline, but he's a guy that I feel like has to be on the field at all times. The linebacker play was not very good in this game. Definitely got to clean up a bunch of stuff there. I thought the pass rush was really good. Had 8 sacks in this game. And I thought the DBs played pretty well for the most part. Sierra Wright gets beat on a one-on-one play by Elijah Badger. But, otherwise, I thought the secondary wasn't tested too much. Kalen Bullock had a nice pick. He came out of nowhere. Never even saw him when I was shooting photos on that play. But second pick against Drew Pine in 2 years for him. But like I said, a lot of stuff to clean up in all the areas.
It felt like Christian Roll-Wallace is a guy in the secondary I want to shout out to. He had some really nice plays, and the linebacker play, I think you're right, wasn't at its best, and we saw some rotation. We got Mason Cobb back, Tackett Curtis, we saw at a big level, had 2 sacks late in the game, but overall it felt like there were a lot of things to clean up, and it's going to be interesting to diagnose where that comes from. Is it that maybe we were just a little too high on USC after the game against Stanford? Is it that they can't play on the road as well as they play at home? Because this is a team, USC under Lincoln Riley, that has not lost in the Coliseum, and they've looked at times a little overwhelmed with a crowd bearing down on them. Whether you're talking about Oregon State, different times in the Pac-12 championship game in Vegas, here tonight, or is it the bye week rust? There's a lot of things that I'm not sure we'll ever get a full answer for. We'll just need to see some more football. But this is a far cry from a team that went and put up 49 points against Stanford at the half. And Arizona State's not that much better of a football team than Stanford. Stanford's bad, but Arizona State coming into this one was supposed to be just as bad, right on that Stanford level. So it's going to be really interesting. The good news is for USC, it happened early in the season. I think it's kind of a wake-up call at different points, and they still got a win. You've seen some other teams. Texas last week was tested by Wyoming. They come out and play a lot better against Baylor this week. Florida State almost loses to Boston College, and they probably should have if Boston College didn't make as many mistakes late in the game. And here they come out and they beat Clemson and kind of push their path forward to the ACC championship game. So if it happens early in the season and you still get a win, sometimes you can look at it as a silver lining, because, as Marshawn Lloyd said it really well, you find out what you need to work on and you can really attack that, because I'm not sure what USC learned about itself, at least anything negative or what things they needed to work on, having 49 points at halftime against Stanford and being 3-0 without being tested a whole ton.
Yeah, definitely. And you learn from road experiences. You learn from close games. They make you better for when you're in a close game against a better team down the road. I think Lincoln Riley said it pretty well. He said, he was asked if this was a step back developmentally, this team this week versus what they had done the first 3 weeks. He said, man, the season's a climb. He said you can't look at it. You can't. He basically said, if we're going up and up and up, where do we go up from 49 points at halftime against Stanford? You're not going to put 56 up the next week and then 65 the next week after that. So they did take a step back as far as their performance. But there's a lot of positives as well. We mentioned all the positives. I mean, Marshawn Lloyd was a beast today. He got his first start, and he pretty much solidified himself as the starter going forward at 150 yards on the ground. He was running, he was averaging 11 yards a carry going into somewhere in the fourth quarter. You wondered, should they run him a little bit more? But then that's taking the ball out of Caleb Williams' hands. And Caleb Williams had 2 touchdowns on the ground and 3 more through the air, connecting twice with Brendan Rice. 4th down, USC goes for it, throws it up to Brendan Rice. He burned the DB, goes up, makes a nice catch. Taj Washington, only 1 catch. All he does is catch touchdowns, though. So nice game for him as well, even though he didn't have a ton of touches, made the most of his one with a big, long touchdown. So, and I mentioned the defensive line. I thought they got a lot of pressure, especially when Arizona State was forced to throw later in the game. USC, just dominated. And that's what I felt like should have been happening more often. So that's kind of the disappointing part about the offense, is that Arizona State did a lot of misdirection, a lot of trying to force USC to stay on their P's and Q's, and USC was over aggressive, and they were able to hit them with some misdirections and some traps and different things that USC was looking the wrong direction basically, and that's something where the linebacker play needs to be better at. And it was very interesting. They do get Mason Cobb back. The linebacker rotation, we've seen 5 different guys be in there, 6 if you want to throw in Chris Thompson, who's had a couple of drives late at games. But we did not see Rajon Davis play any defense today. He was on special teams, he was healthy, but the rotation was Mason Cobb and Tackett Curtis to start the game, and then Eric Gentry subbed in and played basically those 3 guys split all the reps. So it was very interesting to see that Rajon Davis, who's been their best linebacker through the first 3 games, was not out there at all. And we'll see if there's a different assessment after watching the tape of this game and if something changes going forward. But that was a very surprising move. Great to see Mason Cobb back. Great to see Tyrone Taleni back. A couple other guys that have been banged up, Jacoby Covington, and he was back in the rotation at cornerback. So a lot of rotation still going on at certain positions. But so that made it even more kind of interesting that with the rotation still happening, Rajon Davis was not a part of that.
What do you make from the frustration and that middle point for USC's offense, where they kind of go early second quarter to late third quarter without putting the ball in the end zone, struggling for a while? Are you concerned about that going forward, or do you think that's just road environment, a couple plays that didn't go their way, and maybe just a little frustration on their side? I
mean, it's just a little frustration. I mean, they had a touchdown, it comes off the board, and that's basically probably a freshman mistake. I had to rewatch the play, but Zachariah Branch getting past the line of scrimmage, because that's the play is designed for him to catch it behind the line of scrimmage so that Taj Washington can be blocking downfield. And then, Caleb Williams takes a hit. Looked like his hand was being evaluated on the sideline. He misses a wide open Austin Jones on the very next play after that. So you wonder, hey, he got his hand hit. Is that why he missed the throw? He missed one a little bit later too, but connects with Taj Washington and connects with a couple others. So the hand was feeling fine enough by the end of the game. But yeah, some small things. Again, clean it up. It's not something to be really worried about. The penalties are the biggest concern there on the offense. It's still offensive line penalties, false starts, those type of things are much more concerned. The pre-snap penalties, that stuff needs to be cleaned up, because they're going to go into another raucous environment next week with Colorado. And as Lincoln Riley said all week and kind of all last 2 weeks, hey, we're going to get everybody's best shot. We're USC. This is going to be everybody else's Super Bowl, basically. So, and Arizona State showed that, after coming off a 29-0 loss to Fresno State. Would they show up? And yeah, they showed up and showed out, and the fan base was here, sell out. Mill Street was closed down like 5 hours before the game. So, they were out and about. They showed out and showed the type of atmosphere USC should expect going forward. You'll see it again next week in Colorado, even with the early game, I'm sure.
It was interesting, a shaky game for Caleb Williams, and he ends up with 5 touchdowns. And you felt like there was frustration, and there was a lot of that in the Utah game for him last year, as well as the Oregon State game, where it just felt like when things weren't going the way that USC's offense wanted, he got frustrated a little bit. Drives would stall. He would be a little frustrated. What did you see from his performance? I know 5 touchdowns, it's easy to look and say another great performance from Caleb Williams, but it definitely was, I think, a down step from what he's had, and he missed a couple layups that he normally doesn't. I don't think he played quite as well as he did the first 3 weeks, but still end up with 5 touchdowns, a pretty good performance.
Yeah, I thought the offensive line was really good in the run game, but wasn't terrific in the pass game. And, he didn't have as much time. Arizona State, I thought their pass rush did a good job of collapsing the pocket on Caleb, not giving him avenues. They used some spies at different times, different things like that. But then he also still creates some magic every once in a while with the Brendan Rice touchdown. You see Brendan Rice, there's not a defender within like 15 yards of him because of what Caleb had done in the backfield to create that extra time. So it was a little bit of an up and down game for him. It wasn't a Heisman game, we'll say that. But again, I think I go back to the Oregon State game last year, the first true road game. He struggled in that game early, and then he put it together at the end. So I think this is, if you compare those two games, Caleb Williams, I think you see the growth in him from last season, where you say he struggled out here and he still scored 5 touchdowns. He still led them to 42 points, whereas last year that game was, 17-14? So that's the difference, I think, in the maturity of him and where he's at as a quarterback. The game he struggles, USC still puts up 42 points.
What do you come away with as a thought process for the defense kind of as a whole? I think a lot of people were safe, kind of saying USC's defense is going to be good this year after their performance against Stanford, as well as the second half against Nevada. I know they had the 8 sacks. I think it was 15 tackles for loss. But do you come away concerned down the stretch of the season for USC's defense?
Yeah, I think there's definitely concerns. I mean, you face the USC offense every day in practice. You should be better when you're playing a team that doesn't have half their offensive line because of injuries and stuff. They're on their second quarterback. They don't have a ton of playmakers on the outside. They should have those tackles for loss. And they should give up some yardage. They shouldn't be giving up the chunk yardage plays to a team like this. The Arizona State offense, in particular, the offense in particular, just does not have the talent right now that should be putting up chunk yardage plays like that on a consistent basis against USC. That's the biggest concern. And part of that is the philosophy of selling out to try to get those, those negative plays, those impact plays, and it works until it doesn't. And, when you face a good enough team and you're not getting tackles for loss, you're not getting sacks, and so you're still giving up those chunk plays, that's when you're seeing Utah roll up 45 points on USC. So that has to be cleaned up. And I don't know if it has to be whether it's Alex Grinch's defensive philosophy needs to change or if they need to put different people in certain positions. But there's definite concern from USC after this game. And it's not just because they gave up 28 points, because some of it is a short field after the fumble. You take that away, how does that change if it's only 21? How do you view the game? You can play that game all day, but the big concern for me is the chunk plays that we're still seeing teams get against USC. Stanford had some of them, and Stanford has no one on offense outside of Urasek. So, I think that it's definitely a concern. We saw some really nice positives in that Stanford game. You thought, hey, maybe they're growing, and there are still things that you see them getting better at, but they got to get better quick when it comes to tackling consistently and staying in your gaps on run plays in particular to be able to not give up those big runs that Scatterbo was able to get.
There's a lot of takeaways you can always come away with a game like this, and every team's got them throughout the season. Are there any more takeaways that you have before we head to Boulder next week for an earlier morning game than where we are right now?
I do want to shout out Romello Height. I asked Eric Gentry, we didn't get a chance to talk to Romello Height after it, but 2 sacks in this game, recovers a fumble. He's been wanting to get there, and he's been close a couple times in recent weeks, but to get his first 2 sacks for USC, I believe his first 2 career sacks, I don't think he had any at Auburn either, to get those after the injury went through. And Eric Gentry even talked about how, he kind of taken a dip. Your confidence takes a dip when you're injured and then you're not performing. And that combination, he gets moved down the depth chart after being the starter last year. Now he's 3rd coming into the season. He bumps up to the backup. And for him to have a huge game, 2 sacks, and like I said, recovering the fumble, I think it was great for him. And Eric Gentry said that he got a game ball after the game, Romello Height did, and that they were super excited. You could see the excitement for the defense on the sideline after his first sack and after he recovered the fumble. They were so excited for him to be, the one making plays because of everything he's kind of gone through, the injuries and whatnot. So great to see him do that. And shout out to Solomon Byrd, another really nice game for him. He got the strip sack that led to that Romello Height fumble recovery and had 2 sacks as well. So I think 3 tackles for loss. He continues to be a monster off the edge for USC. So you got pieces on the defense. Can you put them all in the right place so that they can be a very successful defense? That's going to be the big question going forward.
Yeah, I feel like everyone's like, well, Bear Alexander's coming in. You've got Anthony Lucas here, as well as you're probably getting Jameel Muhammad off the edge, and it's been Solomon Byrd and Romello Height who have played really well the last 2 weeks. You also get Jameel Muhammad playing very well. Bear Alexander, his first full sack on the defense. So that defensive line is definitely forming in the pass rush game. Now, what we learned from this Arizona State offensive line, I'm not quite sure, but we'll see if USC can keep it up against another pretty porous offensive line in Colorado that just allows Shedeur Sanders to get sacked basically every other play when we were watching Oregon and Colorado earlier. But anyways, that's all we've got for you guys today. If you're watching this on Saturday night, go to sleep. If you're watching this on Sunday, I hope you've got a good day of NFL football and enjoy the rest of it. USC wins 48-28 here in Tempe. For Shotgun Spratling, I'm Jack Smith. Check out uscfootball.com for more.